Hi, welcome to Darkwood Brew, a convergence point online and offline for people of faith and other spiritual seekers who are finding community and companionship, inspiration and encouragement for our journey through life's dark wood. Tonight we have a special episode. We have been actually moving on a path for the last 2 years here at Darkwood Brew, known under the rubric By This Way of Life, in which we've been exploring the way of life that Jesus invited us to follow in 12 6 to 8 part series. Well, we ended that 2-year exploration last week, and this week we're celebrating. Now, we could have called on some of the big heavy hitters out there in the Christian scene, like Phyllis Tickle and Brian McLaren, Diana Butler-Bass, Frank Schaefer, and so forth. Good friends of Darkwood Brew who have been good supporters and could come on and pat us on the back or what have you, reflect on their experiences of Darkwood Brew. But we thought far more interesting for this series, as much as those people are interesting, is we wanted to hear from you. You are the guest tonight on Darkwood Brew. We'll be featuring Darkwood Brewers from Portland, Oregon to Portland, Maine, and as far away as the Czech Republic, coming in live via Skype tonight. So looking forward to reflecting on what the series this last 2 years has meant to you. Along the way, we'll be hearing from the band and playing some clips from past Darkwood Brews over the last 2 years. In fact, before we go any further, let's take a little walk back in time, looking over just a brief overview of the last 2 years of Darkwood Brew.
Are you with me? I need you to go with me.
If I look at my monitor, I can actually see through the internet to the Darkwood Brew viewers at home.
The deeper you dig, the more you see that we all connected.
Missionaries around the world discovered was, as they went out there, that God was already there.
I believe there are some debts that we can never repay. And I believe there are some words that we can never unsay.
Yes, God could have done it all on God's own, but that's not what God wanted to do.
Yeah. Has your the expansion of scientific knowledge for you made God smaller?
Absolutely not. It makes the whole thing more awesome.
I think it's so incredibly sad that people want so badly to be faithful, myself included, and make some of our worst mistakes trying to be faithful.
It's not only happening in music, it's happening in all of the arts. And we can actually go so far as to say possibly there may be some sort of a spiritual renaissance taking place.
Well, that summed up my whole life right there. How can I
They said, Mr. Bray, Mr. B, which is what they called me, even though you don't get it, we love you. And we're going to bring you into this, to an understanding that this love is for everyone.
Let's look at the Rolling Stones, for instance. Let's look at their song, Sympathy for the Devil. I shouted out, who killed the Kennedys when after all it was you and me? And now that, to me, is so prophetic. That is such a prophetic insight.
Seraphim, do you hear the prayers, petitions over your honours ringing?
I think it's interesting that the people Jesus hung out with were the sinners and the outcasts and the people that all the religious folks looked down on. And
You are reading my notes. This is one of those moments of grace, and if this is the only reason that God made me gay, then so be it. So I said, Tammy, I want to tell you something. I want to tell you that God loves you. And it just so happens that I'm gay and God loves me.
Remembering all the reasons why, thinking I would never die.
What makes wine magical in your opinion?
That I cannot tell you, and therefore is magic.
It's not practice, it's discipline, and none of us like discipline, you know? And so I think that's why we tend to shy away from adopting contemplative practice, because it feels like discipline, it doesn't feel like prayer.
There's nothing wrong either with being in the struggle, and there's nothing wrong with time of meditation and reflection.
Hold on to these things, but don't hold them so tightly, because what you hold so tightly, you no longer hold for me. But
forgiveness a lot of times is that exercise of allowing the other's story to abide next to your story.
Trust is a significant piece, and it is the part I think we tend to cut ourselves off from when we think it's our job to control creation.
The whole thing is spiritual, including the randomness.
The ancient Celts believed that the soul, that the body actually is a subset of the soul, that our souls extend out beyond ourselves.
Stand up in front of your congregation sometime and just say, hey, today I'm an atheist, and maybe by next week I'll be an agnostic. And who hasn't been there at some point?
I don't think we could change what we do to create a restaurant that is one size fits all, because I think that's what makes it special.
And when we talk to those people who were feeling uncomfortable or had left, from either side of that great theological divide, what we discovered was they had a lot in common with each other.
One of the things that we're going to have to do is understand that this is not about picking teams, and it's not about joining an organization.
The Christian under 40 says, I will lift up mine eyes through the Hubble and, oh my God, which is the spirituality of astonishment. Promised land.
So we started this series on May 6th. It was 2012, with our first Pneuma passage of the series, which was from John 14. And our producer, Scott Grissell, has gone back deep into the Darkwood Brew archives to recover this vintage footage of our very first Pneuma Divina passage from John 14, which we would like to roll for you right now.
We're going to be reading from the Gospel of John, the 14th chapter, verses 1 through 7.
Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be also. And you know the way to the place where I am going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you know me, you will know my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him.
So that's what started this whole By This Way of Life series, the insight that it is a way of life that Jesus is inviting us into. And we've been tracing that not only at Darkwood Brew, but also at our my home church of Countryside Community Church. In our morning services, we've also been exploring By This Way of Life too. So if you ever want to get to the countrysideucc.org website, you can see 2 years worth of sermons on By This Way of Life as well. The By This Way of Life series was meant to focus on 12 characteristics of which might be called convergence Christian faith. The understanding that the kind of the common notions that are really uniting Christians that may have come from liberal or conservative backgrounds, who have been out in the wilderness in recent years, kind of looking for a new way of being Christian. When you find those folks, they meet up with each other and they discover they have a lot more common ground than they ever had before, and they're discovering it's not really a new way of being Christian. It's really a very ancient way of being Christian. So one of those series we actually did was, if you put up that graphic, was actually not so long ago. We did the Great Convergence, and asking what's so great about it, and noticing that these people who used to consider themselves even theological enemies are now finding great and deep and lasting friendships. We also then, with the very first series that we started was The Faith of Jesus in a Pluralistic World. And that really set everything off and really provides a surprising context for the common ground that people are now sharing across the great theological divide. We introduced the understanding that when Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes unto the Father except through me," a statement that has typically been, in recent years, been interpreted by Christians to mean that only those who believe in Jesus get into heaven and everybody else is condemned. We actually took 6 weeks to explore that passage, and it's in its context in the Gospel of John, within Christianity, and within ancient Judaism and Christian history, using scholars from all over the country, and discovered that things are not what they appear. That really, when Jesus says, "No one comes unto the Father except through me," I mean, this is the same Jesus who in the very first chapter of the Gospel of John says, is identified as the one who was in the beginning, was with God and was in God, and through whom all things were created, and through whom not a single thing failed to be created. Like the through me was about everything, that Jesus is a part, that Christ is a part of all of creation. Therefore, all of creation has an ability to access, to connect with the Christ, who says also, "I have other sheep who are not of this fold." Well, when you start to understand that it is not a belief in Jesus, but a way of life that Jesus is inviting us into that connects us to God, it causes you to go back and reevaluate all of Christian theology. And again, what we found in this reevaluation was not a new form of Christianity, but actually a recovery of the ancient roots that we come from. And so we found ourselves in a series, for instance, Failing, Falling, and Flying, and looking at that original doctrine that people used to found a very exclusionary faith off of, about original sin, that God basically hates you and I until we come to belief in Jesus, and then we're saved. So Jesus becomes our ticket into heaven. What we found by looking at the creation stories of Genesis, and not just the creation stories, but every one of those originating accounts, those creation accounts in Genesis 1 through 11, that there was a recurring pattern that, yes, we are marked by original sin, but we're also marked by original blessing, and yet we're defined by neither one. We're defined by original grace. And if we're defined by original grace, that all people are defined by grace, then we are defined by a salvation which has come to us before we've ever believed anything or done anything to deserve it. Well, moving on, we explored then what creation itself, that oftentimes that original sin doctrine led people to believe that death came into the world because of our sin, and that death is actually then a mark of our sinfulness. And yet we discovered that in our series on evolving faith, evolving universe, that actually in God's creation, death provides a life-bearing role, that really all of creation is about death and resurrection, that evolutionary history really incorporates death, death of species and regeneration and into something, a new form over and over again. Since the beginning of the universe, death has not been a mark of sin, but rather a part of God's creative process. It's about not simply death, but death and resurrection. And as we were toying around looking at those creation accounts, we also discovered in our series, On Earth as It Is in Heaven, that the earth itself, therefore, is not a damned place, that we're not simply here to play, not to stay, but rather all of creation is part of God's loving self-expression. That when we relate deeply to the creation, we are also connecting to ways that God is revealing God's very self to us. And part of, as we were looking at how God reveals God's self in creation, we also looked at those creation accounts, at every day of creation, what various aspects of creation could have to say about God. One of those aspects of creation was actually not creative, but rather the Sabbath. In our series called Busy, we realized that, well, if we're too busy to create to honor the Sabbath like God honored it, then probably we're busier than God. We explored many ways that we can unbusy our schedule in order to reconnect with God. We furthered that understanding of reconnection in our series called Listen, in which we recognize that revelation comes to us both through the Bible, which is a central part of our faith and our understanding of God, but also through reading the Bible prayerfully, listening for God's living word, not simply the word in black and white, but the living word that continues to speak to us today. And how do we, as people of faith who across the great theological divide on either side of that old divide, how do we honestly ask that question? How do we follow the Holy Spirit in our day, where we also recognize that, bring that healthy postmodern skepticism to that very process? Was it the Holy Spirit speaking or just the pizza I ate? How do we responsibly do that? We moved on then to recognize that when we can connect with God, we are invited to dream God's dream. In our series, Drawn In, we looked at that we're really called, first of all, to dream God's dream, and second of all, to discern our place within that dream. That's a critical ordering there. We're not supposed to simply dream whatever our dream is and then expect God to fit within it, but rather we dream God's dream and then find our place within that dream. In our series, Prophetically Incorrect, we discovered that not all the world is fond of dreaming God's dream first, that especially in our political system, oftentimes it's about dreaming the human dream first and expecting God to come along for the ride, and that it's healthy to maintain a separation of church and state, or the faith community and the political one, in order to retain the prophetic office of the faith community. We'll use the book of Amos as a view within that perspective. We also learned that oftentimes when we dream a human dream first, we exclude all kinds of people, leave all kinds of people out of God's dream. In our series, Hookers, Looters, and Cheats, we discovered that Jesus kept some very curious company, people that would make most of us uncomfortable, that oftentimes in our day, Jesus shows up in the very form of those with whom we feel most discomfort. We also concretized that, put a finer edge on that in a particular community that has oftentimes been denigrated within the Christian tradition, that is the LGBT community. In our series, For the Love of God, a conversation about the Bible and homosexuality, we brought in, again, biblical scholars and leaders from across a wide variety of Christians, the Christian spectrum, to really reflect on what does the Bible have to say about homosexuality and how does that fit in with the living word of today. And then finally, we wrapped up our whole By This Way of Life series by asking also, what is God's dream for we as individuals? With the understanding that each of us has a particular calling, a vocation, a mission in life that is distinctive to each of us and that is made known to us through that which brings us most fully alive. That which brings you most fully alive in this world is part of your mission and your ministry in the world. You have a ministry that is as sacred as any prophet, priests, or kings. That really the living of the faith is not about who wears the robes, but who lives the life. That's in a nutshell the By This Way of Life series. 12 little vignettes into the way of life into which Jesus calls us. Along the way, we got a lot of feedback from you, and Chris Alexander was asking our Facebook community over this last couple of weeks, what has Darkwood Brew meant for you in your world? And Chris, you had some pretty interesting...
Yeah, we had a couple of responses specifically. Brother John, as we know him, on the chat room.
I see him online tonight.
Yeah. He answered and says, Darkwood Brew has become a consistently beautiful, thin place each Sunday night for me. I have found that the weekly conversations have become integral to my Christian walk, and there is a great deal of beauty in the music each week, and the Pneuma reading meditation has proved itself quite fruitful for me on several occasions. In addition, there is just something really special about our online communion, and I'm not just talking the Guinness either.
Not everybody
he
brings
consistently
wine
has
to communion.
Guinness.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's really good. It's a kind of overview of all the things that we do on Darkwood Brew and how it touches them in different ways, different times. Will Rainey says, Darkwood Brew has inspired me to learn more about the cutting-edge ways we can do ministry online. It's redefining the very thing we call church by bringing the altar and head priests of our time into people's home and onto their phones. I see great things ahead.
I see Will online tonight,
yeah.
too.
So we have all kinds of folks that haven't been able to find connection in their own communities that find it through Darkwood Brew. We have clergy that are given permission just to sit back and worship. That's nice. We have techno freaks that are finding all kinds of new ways to use this. So it's an amazing touchstone for folks especially over the past 2 years with this series of By This Way of Life. That's been nice.
I've been impressed by how many people have actually found a local community as a result of first, kind of being disillusioned, finding community on Darkwood Brew, and then asking, well, hey, where's a church near me? Yeah.
Well, we bring a church into your hometown, right there in your home. So that's kind of nice. But we have all kinds of small groups that, you're right, are taking advantage of that, and house churches are springing up all over because of it, using Darkwood Brew materials.
All right.
Very nice.
Yeah. Well, been a lot of good feedback, and we want to be. We recognize that just about 2 months ago, we received an email through the Darkwood Brew email port from the Czech Republic, from a gentleman named Don Hall, who was asking, who has been viewing Darkwood Brew during this series, and was actually interested in starting something up in Prague.
Yeah.
And we are very pleased to be joined by Don Hall tonight, who's coming to us very late night from Czechoslovakia. Well, welcome, Don.
Welcome and greetings from your future, where it's already Monday here. And the future looks great.
Any good stock tips you can give us about you? Wow.
Well, Darkwood Brew stock is pretty good right now.
Great. So, what do you do in the Czech Republic?
Well, I teach English, I perform, and I also do life coaching.
Great. And you have been viewing Darkwood Brew. I'm guessing not during the live episodes, but in recorded mode.
Through the archived episodes, actually, yes, for almost about a year now.
Wow. Are there any, as you look back in a year worth of viewing, are there anything that sticks out to you? Any highlights or kind of aha moments?
There's so many, but the one that really touched me the most, I suppose, was the episode For the Love of God with Bishop Gene Robinson. Having some friends who know him personally and knowing the trials and all the struggles he's been through during his years as bishop, from the death threats to the stress it put on his relationships, is just the incredible stress he was under the whole time. And now watching videos of him and seeing such humility, such love for those who came out against him so viciously, it's just a big inspiration
Yes.
of what Jesus really is.
Bishop Gene Robinson, who was the first openly gay bishop in the Episcopal Church. And you're exactly right. I really shared that kind of that awe and wonder of a man who has really had so much thrown at him. I mean, way more than most people get in a lifetime in terms of negative, all kinds of negativity from his very faith community. And yet he's so amazingly gracious and has turned all of that negative into really love.
Yeah. It's amazing to me that people say you see the Jesus in people, but I think the church world never expected to see Jesus in the body of an openly gay bishop. I think that was a little bit shocking.
Right.
For a lot of people, yeah.
Absolutely.
But he was such an inspiration, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I understand that you have some personal reasons for finding something in his story as well.
Very much so. I myself was a minister for 15 years until I came out of the closet. And when that happened, I lost pretty much everything. Friends, family, ministry, finances, was even faced with being homeless for a while. And it's just through that cycle of the love of God that just is rooted deep within us, that doesn't let us go, that gave me courage and hope to continue.
And recently, I understand you I actually saw a video up on YouTube which you're telling your story.
Yeah. That was quite an amazing experience. I was able to create a one-man theatrical production about the story of my life. And admittedly, my life, of course, does tell the story of a gay man coming out of the closet and losing it all. But it's not a gay story. I don't even say it's even a religious story. I say it's a story of forgiveness, a story of hope, and a story of if I can go through it and come out the other side, so can you.
Yeah. I really found it quite a moving story, and you actually are hoping to perhaps one day start a Darkwood Brew like internet community of your own in Prague, I understand?
Yes, I am. I will have to take it through a different context because I live in a society that is largely atheist in nature. So the way that I approach things will have to be decidedly different, but the purpose will be the same. Yes.
That's great. And up on the screen, in fact, if you could put that back up on the screen there, we have a email address for Don, which he graciously supplied us in case you are interested in contacting Don if you happen to be in the Czech Republic or would like to be communicating with him anyway. He welcomes your correspondence. And,
yes, I was really, yes.
Yeah. Well, it's great to have you on the program tonight, and if someone wants to find that video of your own testimony on YouTube, I understand that you could probably the fastest way to get there is to simply get onto YouTube and put in the search terms Don Hall, and then Goscha TV. That's GOSCHA TV, and you'll find his presentation in the Czech Republic.
I think if anyone gets the chance to watch it, and the most moving part to me is the end of it. You must understand this presentation was given at an esoteric festival, and as such, it was decidedly something that wasn't very esoteric. And what was amazing was at the end of this was not a story about a psychic or crystals or New Age. It was a story of forgiveness and hope. And at the end of it, this audience, which was also largely heterosexual, gave me a standing ovation. And if you can understand what it felt like for the first time in 12 years to be back on the stage, and this time sharing a story that probably was so much more genuine than anything I ever shared before. It was an amazing experience. Amazing.
Real testimony how whenever any of us get real with each other and bare our souls, it strikes a chord. And
it cuts theological, spiritual lines, cuts across heterosexual or straight. All those things fall by the side.
Well, we look forward to seeing more from you and hopefully tuning into Darkwood Check sometime soon. Thanks for staying up so late to be on with us live tonight, Don.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Good night. Well, the band is going to be playing some various musical pieces tonight, brief ones, but we want to introduce Matt. Who do we have over there tonight?
Well, Eric, we are actually going tonight to do a plethora of Chuck Moronick's music. A different guy in the band is going to be featured on every tune. During the course of the episode, Ricky Williams will be featured on Jesus in the House. I'm going to take a crack at Many Mansions. Matt Amandus will play on Second Line Blues. Special guest Steve Gomez will play on Chuck's tribute to Psalm 66, which is entitled Let All the Earth Cry Out with Joy. And then we're going to wed that into Chuck's song called The Canticle, featuring Carlos Figueroa.
With all this material, we will not be doing our standard Darkwood Brew format with meditation tonight. We will be holding communion at the end, so if you'd like to have that, get out that Guinness or the wine and bread for later. We'd love to have you do that. And as the band plays this first piece, we're going to be playing kind of a roll over the top of the band, some reflection and a thank you to the incredible Darkwood Brew crew that brings Darkwood Brew to you every week. Over the course of the last 2 years, we've had about 100 people involved in Darkwood Brew. So let's celebrate the crew as we celebrate the band and its music.
Thank you.
Thank you, band, and also thank you, crew. It's been a marvelous journey these last couple of years, and really the last 3 years total, over 3 years with Darkwood Brew, 3.5 almost now. We want to also note that tonight you won't be seeing the band for a little while. They're going to take a break for the next series. So our next series will be a 4-part series called Forgiveness. Just called Forgiveness. There's a lot of common misconceptions about forgiveness in Christianity today. People expect that if they've been hurt, that if they're Christian, they must absolutely forgive the sin of the other, and even if that hurt keeps going. And that's actually fundamentally not what forgiveness was about. Forgiveness is about a complete restoration of relationship, which sometimes means not forgiving until certain things get worked out. We'll be exploring that whole process of forgiveness, some of the more controversial aspects and some of the more things that I think they're going to cause people to have a great deal of relief. Along with our guest for that series, you've seen him before, Reverend Darkwood Brew, Reverend Bruce Van Blair, who has always been popular when he's joined us for a couple of complete series, or one complete series in the past, and for the book of Colossians, and we'll be joined by Bruce during this next series. So 4 weeks, and during that time we will be featuring music. It'll be the music of Chuck Moronic doing his jazz psalms, and Carol Rogers. Carol Rogers will be here every week, and Chuck's music will be joining us live. So we're going to pipe in Chuck and Carol singing for fun over the next 4 weeks. And then after those 4 weeks are over, at the end of May, we're actually going to do for the first time ever, we're going to take the whole summer off, give the whole crew a break and a chance to rejuvenate, and we'll come back in the fall, starting the first Wednesday of September. Wednesday with Darkwood Brew 2.0. You might have already guessed, part of what means to be 2.0 is we will be switching to Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern, and we'll be following something called the Narrative Lectionary. You can find the Narrative Lectionary at workingpreacher.com. It comes out of Luther Theological Seminary. It's an amazing lectionary. Boy, if you ever get me on the topic of lectionary, I could go for about 2 hours about why I hate the common lectionary, why it's done more to destroy our sense of story and our faith story in the last many years than it has been to enhance it. But the Narrative Lectionary is something that I and a number of us, growing number, are wildly enthusiastic about. It really works at getting us deep into the story of faith again. It's a 4-year lectionary cycle, and we're going to try it out for the first year, and if that goes well, we're going to continue for all 4 years with it. So you can already check out the text we'll be featuring in the fall. Also, you can read an amazing cover story about the new lectionary in the Christian Century and why it's growing so rapidly amongst churches. But going on Wednesday will also allow a lot of ministers who are going to be using the Narrative Lectionary this fall to access Darkwood Brew on Wednesday, get their sermons going for Sunday, exactly. And by Sunday we'll have a small group resource ready just for you and your church, or if you're in a small group, right on Sunday morning we'll have that, and then we'll rebroadcast Darkwood Brew with live chat for Sunday night, so a whole congregation can join also if they've been sparked by the sermon in the morning. So a lot of fun things ahead, more surprises. But next series, if we don't go away yet, next series we'll have 4 weeks beyond today before we take that summer break.
And during that summer break, we'll still have rebroadcasts, and they'll give you a chance to kind of go back and look at some of the stuff that we're so happy to be part of over the last 3.5 years. And hopefully some of our Skype guests that have appeared on those shows will also be with us on a live chat throughout the whole time. So even though the shows are rebroadcast, we will in fact have a live chat during that conversation, so we can keep the communities going and keep everyone talking to one another even throughout the summer. That's right. And we'll be featuring some of the favorite series from times past, so be looking forward to that. Thank you for that reminder. Well, up next from Portland, Oregon, we have a guest on Cecil Prescott, who was on a previous series. I believe Cecil was on the Busy series. Yeah, that's right. And has been a viewer. He was actually one of the Darkwood Brew community for a long time. And then we said, hey, would you mind coming on for a series? And he did. And he's back tonight as a guest to comment on Darkwood Brew. Welcome, Cecil.
Greetings. Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just great.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. It's great to be here talking about busy. I'm missing a crop walk right now to be with you.
Oh, well, we got you a little less busy then in order to come on then.
Exactly.
Great. So, and you're part of a church in Portland, aren't you?
Yes, I'm part of the Ainsworth United Church of Christ, and I'm there. I serve as Minister of Faith Formation and Youth Ministries.
Great. And how long have you been a viewer of Darkwood Brew?
You know, I've been trying to figure that out. I can't even recall how I discovered you through the internet somehow. And I recall it must have been a couple of years. And I believe it started during a time I was off during Christmas break. And I somehow ran across you and been hooked ever since.
Yeah, that's great. So what, as you look over this last couple of years of the series, are there any high points for you or particular aha moments that you experienced?
Yeah, there are a couple. One thing that's been very important for me is the online community and the conversation that takes place during the broadcast and even after the broadcast. I was somewhat hesitant in believing that a community could develop that way, but I've been comforted and nourished by the online community, as well as the particular guests and their ability to share their vulnerability. Our guest previously talked about Bishop Robinson, but not only Bishop Robinson, but I think many of us have been able to open us as we explore the possibility to go beyond our traditions and the ability to listen and hear other people as they share their journeys.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I know a lot of that's a kind of a scary journey sometimes, especially if you don't have any close companions around. And I think that has been one of the things we've consistently heard over the years is provides that that reassurance that we're not alone out there in the wilderness, and we're not crazy either, or at least as crazy as we sometimes think we are. And there are a lot of the things that we thought put us on the outside of the Christian community really are reflective of the very center of where this convergence faith is going.
Definitely, and I think one thing that I've gained from the Darkwood Brew experience is to explore more about how local faith community can use the technology in terms of reaching a broader audience. I had a conversation with a group of us who are trying to see how we can expand our use of social media and ways in which we can reach out to people who will not necessarily enter into a church building. So thank you for sharing some of your gifts with our community.
Well, thank you, Cecil, for being an engaged viewer and also an engaging guest, both during the Busy series and tonight as well. We thank you for taking some time out of the crop walk to join us. And I get over to your neck of the woods every now and again. I look forward to my next visit with you in person in Portland.
Well, it is God's country, so we look forward to seeing you.
Absolutely. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Cecil.
Good day.
Cecil mentioned that the use of electronic resources at Darkwood Brew has been kind of helping to inspire other communities to use this. Also, I would note that the resources that Darkwood Brew has been producing too have been used then very inexpensively by communities all over the world. I think Scott Grissell, our producer, produced a couple of slides that just kind of show some of the reach of just the Darkwood Brew DVD resources. If you put those up on the screen, first of all, the United States is pretty much every state in the country now. We have been receiving orders from churches and also house groups that are not necessarily affiliated with churches using those. And then also the next slide shows the world reach of Darkwood Brew. Now it's the world viewership is far larger, but in terms of just actually ordering the small group DVDs, it also reaches out into Canada, Great Britain, Australia, and New Zealand. And there's one place that Darkwood Brew doesn't reach out to as a result of this series too. If you put the next slide up, we won't mention which country banned Darkwood Brew, but also somebody decided we were a bit too effective. in their country and felt a bit threatened by that. And so Darkwood Brew is not streaming to that country. So all kinds of ways our resources are being used and, well, not used or banned around the world.
Makes it more appealing in some places, right?
That's right. Well, let's move over to the band once again for a little more Chuck Moronic jazz song. Thanks, guys. Well, we're joined right now by actually a person who obviously is here local to us. This is Jessica Johnson, and she is a member of Countryside Community Church and a longtime Darkwood Brew viewer who has a special personal connection to this By This Way of Life series. What is that connection, Jessica?
Yeah, when we first started the By This Way of Life series, I had just come back from maternity leave from having my first child, my daughter, and I had attended a worship team meeting that was the first time that you had mentioned that we were going to be doing this series.
Yeah.
And then I just had my second child 5 weeks ago and started coming to worship team again, and and I got to perform on Easter. I got to dance on Easter to finish up the series. So it's been bookended by babies.
Began and ended the series with babies.
Ended with babies.
Watch out. What's
right.
in this coffee
Just be
is
careful.
Pretty
Be careful.
potent stuff.
It's hot.
That's right. Well, so besides having babies, are there any other ways that this series
it's a whole
has
different way of life, having babies.
Yeah, that's right. But during the course of the series, any particular highlights or aha moments for you?
Yeah, I think well, there's been a ton. I mean, I think there's been I've had a aha moment in each section of this series, but I think the most significant ones were the past two series, the last two series, so the Convergence series and then the Vocatio series. In starting with the Convergence series, because my story is I grew up in a dual faith household. I grew up actually in the Jewish faith, and then developed a relationship with Jesus, and it's been it's been a very impactful part of my life and an impactful experience in my life, and it's been the Convergence series. I think was the first time where I got to hear other people from a larger context sort of expressing and verbalizing what I always felt inside, but was never really able to connect with other people about. Being a person who feels still very strongly connected to my Judaism, but then also does have a very significant relationship with Jesus. So that sort of opened up a kind of a special place inside me. And then I was really moved by Melanie's story of finding her way into nursing, and
My
your
wife
story,
Melanie's during the Mercadio series,
yes,
yeah.
and your story about finding your way into the ministry. I have been sort of wrestling with the idea of actually getting my doctorate for the past really like 12 years, but most significantly for the past like 6-ish months. So that series was a way to really help me sort of take that next step on the faith journey with God to make that, or to see how he was going to make that a reality. So,
well, glad that could be of help on your journey. And
Yeah, thanks.
as you're reflecting on your Jewish background too, in the Great Convergence series, I was remembering too that during that series we had a wonderful Rabbi Aryeh Azrael from Temple Israel here in Omaha on that series as well, who was reflecting on just how those very characteristics that are really constituting the new location of common ground between those in Christianity from across the great theological divide are also forming the context of common ground within Judaism as well.
Yeah.
It was very fascinating to see how wide and broad spread this is. So.
Yeah, I'm excited to see, hopefully to see some more people coming to that realization and having it be more public and more just distributed widely among different faith communities.
Yeah. Well, in a world that is so much in need of reaching across the divides, it's a refreshing thing to see, and I think a very hopeful thing to see. I think it's something a reflection of the Holy Spirit's work within Christianity and within other faith communities as well, bringing us closer together, even as the world enters a time of great danger. Bringing us great source of hope.
Yeah, I think hope is a good word to ascribe to it. It makes me feel very hopeful that there eventually, people will be, or there will be a place for people like me who grew up, who doesn't feel like I would even be able to make the decision to be either one faith or the other faith, or ascribe to one community, be a part of one community or another community. It's sort of like asking me to divide myself. So it's nice to see it gives me hope that maybe that I won't have to feel like I have to do that anymore.
Yeah. Rumor has it, I heard somewhere that Jesus grew up Jewish. I don't know if that's true or not. But,
that's kind of, I don't know. Don't tell.
That's right.
Oh, no, wait, no, we can tell that now. Because
Yeah,
of the convergence.
That's right.
So exciting.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for adding your own insights to the mix here. And we're going to go now to a Darkwood Brew viewer. When we start up Darkwood Brew, we always felt that we'll kind of fire the first volley out there, provide some leadership, but then ultimately what we want to do is the leadership for Darkwood Brew should come from the community itself. And one of the many examples of how that's worked is Ian Lynch. Ian Lynch started as a viewer, and I can't think of a thing that Ian hasn't done now with Darkwood Brew, from blogging to being a guest on Darkwood Brew to being an administrator during our rebroadcast. Consistently for the last 2 years, to representing us at the Wild Goose Festival. It goes on and on. Let's hear now from Ian Lynch, who has recorded his observations from Brimfield, Massachusetts.
I'm really glad that I have this opportunity to share some of my reflections on what it means for me personally now to have reached the end of this umbrella series by this way of life. I know that it's impacted my thoughts, and I pray that it's impacted my behavior as well. In terms of my thoughts, I hear that verse where Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," a bit differently now than I did before. Certainly when I think of Jesus as the way, I don't hear it as the way, that Jesus is being exclusionary in that, but that Jesus is saying that for us, that expansiveness of God's great and wonderful love, that God's grace can be experienced in a human life. That for Jesus, that way to God exists within his very being, and he offers that to us. That as we follow in his steps, and we also walk this way of life, that we too might experience the vastness, the grandness of God's grace and inclusion, knowing that we are included and that by that grace also all of our brothers and sisters, that is, everyone on the planet who is alive, is a part of our family, and that all that lives is part of this creation for which we must care, that is how we show our love for God. This experience with Darkwood Brew is a digital or virtual experience for me, as it is for many of you, and it is an opportunity for us to connect using technology. And in those connections, we have the opportunity to model our behavior with one another. And I hope that in this time of experiencing this umbrella series by this way of life, that I've changed my behavior somewhat, that I've become aware of the idea that I am following Jesus no matter where I am. And so when I am administering the chat at the rebroadcast or writing for the blog, I am trying to model this way of life and live it myself. Even now when I'm on my Facebook news feed, it's something that I consider how it is that others might see me, how they will see the love of God showing forth from me, because that is the way of life that I'm called to live. It's a great challenge, and it's also a great gift. Darkwood Brew is a great gift to me because I get to come and worship and meditate and be fed, something that I'm more often providing for others in the context of a pastor and a preacher. And so I receive those gifts, and I'm really thankful to be able to offer them in return and look forward to continuing to do that in the days and weeks to come.
Thanks, Ian. You always impress us with your tie as well as with your words.
He's got a million of them.
That's right. Well, we have one more guest before the evening's over. Bob Grove-Markwood from the BTS Center in Portland, Maine. That was the former Bangor Theological Seminary. But before we get to Bob, Chris, is there a highlight or two that you want to hold up from your own experience of the By This Way of Life series?
Well, the thing that has struck me throughout this whole series is the use of language throughout. Language is my favorite thing anyway, but in this particular case, it's always new language that I'm hearing from folks that are professionals in their fields, that are using language that helps me reframe what I'm thinking, helps me rethink the God question in the midst of all that, and helps me more intentionally look at what God is already doing out there in the world. And I love that about it. So I have language now that I can use to talk about the issues that I didn't have before. So I'm much more readily able to talk to those issues in the world and use the God language in the midst of that. So it's been incredibly helpful for me to engage in conversation with more and more people every week over a 2-year period. So now I can lead those discussions. I can be the one to say, hey, have you ever thought about God in relation to science? Or did you know what black holes are all about? Those things fascinate me. I love black holes. So I've learned a great deal secularly as well as where God is already active in the world. And I have language now in which to talk to people about that. I
That's
love
a good
that.
observation. Yeah, that reminds me of a comment from a Darkwood Brew viewer a while back. It said, Darkwood Brew adds to my stock of available reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of how that relanguaging, finding words to express that which is within, has always been there perhaps, but never had the language to get out there and become manifest in the world.
Well, the By This Way of Life is such a broad spectrum of issues and conversation and experience in the world. And talking to how many guests did we have during that whole series, and how all that language is a reality for them in which they live. That's a great frame to work with. And that makes it part of my reality now too, and so I can live it.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, we want to go now to across to the other side of the United States, once again to Bob Grove-Markwood, who's joining us from Portland, Maine. And Bob, it's good to have you back on Darkwood Brew.
Well, Eric, it's good to see you again. Can you hear me okay?
You are sounding and looking great.
All right. Flatterer.
Now, Bob, you are the executive director of something called the BTS Center. What is that?
The BTS Center, you've heard me say in other contexts, we're sort of an upstart startup, but we are the spiritual successor and missional successor to Bangor Theological Seminary, which had its final commencement service last June after almost 200 years of providing theological education. And we hope to continue to share that legacy, certainly in northern New England, where we've been for so many years, but more widely perhaps into the future. But we've gone through a process of, in some sense, emptying, and now trying to grow into a new sense of what the church needs and what we need to do to be most faithful in following God's call upon our resources and our ministries. So it's a new startup in some ways, but we've got a pretty deep roots and legacy to build on.
Yes, very strong legacy and a strong connection to the kind of the heart of Christian faith in the United States and abroad, which you then now are taking with you into the future and helping these new seeds of life grow throughout the United States. It's been fascinating to see what you all been up to.
Yes, well, not much yet, other than engaging in some significant partnerships, trying to get conversations started as much as we can, preparing the ground and planting seeds. And I'd say related to that, one of the seeds that we're looking forward to planting soon, as we're beginning a project that some of your viewers will know, a partnership that we've engaged in with Countryside Church and Darkwood Brew, and the Converging Paths at the intersection of faith and vocation. That project is something we're a part of, and very excited about what that will be. And reminding everyone, as you have too, it's a startup project, it's a development project, but the use of and being able to use the kinds of materials that you've created with the By This Way of Life series, that will be one of the materials, the resources that will be at the heart of this project, not so much as a product or an off-the-shelf standalone type of thing, although it is also very effective as that, but as more of a tool that we'll use in small groups and to build around spiritual formation and theologically grounded conversation and companionship with each other on a journey that's going on. So we've got a couple of years of work ahead of us. I haven't, and I must confess, not seen all of the series, but I will be in the next 2 years, I can guarantee.
Great. You and quite a number of people who are helping us pilot this program in small groups from around the country, including from Maine to California. And in fact, if you are a viewer who would like to be participating in the new Converging Paths ministry, which is this partnership he mentioned between Darkwood Brew and the BTS Center, and also an online community called the New Church, headed by Bruce Van Blair, I would love to get you involved. And you can actually simply hit the Darkwood Brew email link saying, I want to get into it or find out more about disciple bands. Disciple bands is the name of these small groups, and where we're actually very much being intentional about asking, what is this way of life into which Jesus calls us, and then discerning our own sense of call and how we're participating in that call by God. So very exciting development with you all, and a way of extending not simply the product of what has been done, but actually extending that call out of Jesus to a world so much in need.
Well, I know you've learned so much over the years from Bruce Van Blair, and as I think back what you've asked some of your other guests as meaningful episodes, one in particular that really I remember and took a full page of notes. I mean, I transcribed everything that Bruce said in one because it touched me so deeply where I was, both personally but also professionally, in some things that we were going through. So I think this experience of the small group, the relationships that we're striving to build, being companions together on a journey as we seek to find our path, our own unique paths in ministry following Jesus. This is great stuff, Eric. So congratulations to you and your team for some wonderful material.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Bob, for joining us tonight, taking time out of your busy schedule, and we look forward to staying very much in touch with you over the next several years, and I'm sure we'll see you again, back again on Darkwood Brew.
All right. Thanks, Eric, so much. God be with you.
Thank you, and you also with you. And we invite you to get communion elements ready, as we'll be engaging in the act of communal communion across the internet sphere and in the coffee house after the band feature. Well, we began this gathering this evening with making reference to John 14, and Jesus is saying that I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes unto the Father except through me. And taking that back also to the very first chapter of the Gospel of John that reads, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things came into being through Him. And without Him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in Him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it." That basic insight that no one comes unto the Father except through this one, through whom all creation came, to me signals that the way we connect with God in this universe is through engaging with life as God has created it in this world, through whom nothing came into being. Apart from God, nothing came into being. By engaging in this life and the way of life into which Jesus signals we must go, we discovered a couple of critical things. One is that we have really no hope of making life work under our own power, under our own authority. We need God. We need a love that exceeds our ability to comprehend. We need a Savior. And the way that Jesus saves us is not simply through believing in somebody who lived 2,000 years ago and getting a get-out-of-hell-free card, but rather saves us through helping us discover for ourselves that we are loved beyond our wildest imagination, and then helping us to determine to live life according to that discovery, to reorient everything in light of that discovery. That very awareness of the depth of God's love for us comes most centrally in this act. We remember on a night of betrayal and desertion, when the people on earth who were the best prepared to receive the Messiah, and the government in which that was the best prepared to, through the Pax Romana, to spread that faith and that love throughout the world, both conspired, both came together, the best of all of us, and broke his body and shed his blood. And yet this meal is not a meal in which we remember simply the demise of Jesus, but rather the beginning of Easter faith, which after being broken and bloodied, Jesus, the God, proved God's love for us by not giving up, not wiping out the world in wrath, but rather coming to us as the Spirit of the living Christ, made available to you and me, to the rest of the world, across every kind of faith tradition we can name, in order to get a bit more inside of our hearts, to reassure us that that nothing we've ever done or nothing we've ever failed to do in life has left us apart from God's ability to reach us with God's love and grace. This is truly a meal of amazing grace, of amazing hope for you, for me, for the world. These are the gifts of God for the people of God. I invite you to share the bread of life, the cup of blessing. Thanks once again to the Brews Brothers for joining us for this celebration episode as well, and we look forward to seeing you back next week as we begin our final series for the season before we begin to rebroadcast for the summer, a series on forgiveness. Looking forward to joining you and Reverend Bruce Van Blair for that series. Until then, my friends, may the Spirit of the living God made known to us most fully in Jesus Christ our Lord, go before you to show you the way, go above you to watch over you, go behind you to push you into those places you may not necessarily go yourself, sometimes through Darkwood Brew, go beneath you to uphold you and uplift you, go beside you to be your strong and constant companion, sometimes as well, along with Darkwood Brew. Dwell inside you to remind you that you are surely not alone, and you are loved beyond your wildest imagination. And may the fire of God's blessing burn brightly upon you and within you, now and always. Amen.